Knowledge Doc, is a nutritionist and chiropractor specializing in healthy eating and alternative healthcare more broadly. He has published over 6,000 videos and amassed 13 million followers on YouTube, and has trained over 2,500 doctors and healthcare practitioners in how diet can impact your health.
You reduce carbohydrates. It then forces your body to go after your own fat as fuel. So for weight loss, it's great. And for other things, it's good too.
In this episode, we discuss his approach to health, from superfoods to intermittent fasting, and get his thoughts on Bobby Kennedy as HHS secretary.
I think if we are going to make some changes, we have to, first of all, make people aware of these hidden ingredients and start to get them out of your diet.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Eric Berg, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. I've watched your show for many years, and so thank you for having me on.
Well, so let's talk about disease and health in America. We spend here in America an incredible amount per capita on healthcare, but the outcomes compared to the amount that's actually being spent seem pretty low. Now, why is that?
Yeah, you're right, because we spend 4.5 trillion and we have the worst health. You know, I think that I'd like to just kind of give everyone a bird's eye view of what I think the situation is, because it's really kind of simple when you step back and look at it. It's like on one side, you have big pharma. Okay, they're helping provide the solutions to our medical problems. And then on the other side, we have big food or the junk food, and they're both kind of funneling down this way. And right in the middle, you have the medical establishment, the system that we're operating off right now. And the paradigm shift, basically, if you want to get healthy, you just take this pill for your symptom. But if we look at the chronic disease, most of that comes from our diet and ultra-processed food calories. It's the junk food, right? That's the majority of problems. So when you look at it, these medications are basically treating the symptom of the junk food. We don't really bring up the diet in that consultation with the doctor. When the doctor evaluates someone, they're not really diving into what they eat. When I was in practice in Alexandria, Virginia for 30 years, I would all day long, the first question I would ask is, well, what are you eating? Someone came in with a problem, whatever it is. When did it start? What did you eat just before that? I had a patient who went to several doctors, including the emergency room, and spent out of pocket $40,000 for her heart problem. She had angina. And no one asked her, like, what did you eat just before you had the symptoms? It was a series of really bad banana splits, right? And like every day for like 3 days in a row. And all I had to do is just change her diet, and all that angina went away. They couldn't find anything on the test.
And define for me junk food, because I actually think that might mean different things for different people.
In order to define junk food, you really have to define what food is first to compare it, because it's kind of hard to talk about junk food without knowing what food is. Food is that which is eaten to sustain energy, the growth and repair of tissue, nourishment. That's what the Latin word for food means. If we compare that to other things that we're eating, like junk food, can junk food actually sustain life? Can it repair our bodies? Can it help us grow? And the answer is no. You're taking a food that's so refined, so processed, so dead. There's nothing else in it. They take all the nutrients out of it. They put a couple synthetic vitamins in there. You have a lot of byproduct and chemicals. It's so refined. It just can sit on the shelf for a long time. Is that food? I don't think it is. Junk food is not food. It's something else. And it's composed of mainly three things. We have the refined sugars, the refined seed oils, and the refined starches, which is basically hidden sugars. And of course, that's like the main three ingredients, but then there's food coloring, and then there's flavorings that you add onto it, and you have preservatives. So if you look at the ingredients of a lot of these foods, it's the same ingredients with the different flavors, different colorings, different packaging. If over 50% of the population is consuming junk food, adults, and over 63% of it, teenagers, are consuming these ultra-processed foods, then how are we going to be able to create health? You can't. So this is really at the root of chronic disease. We're not eating things to sustain life, and this is why we have the chronic illness.
Let's talk a little bit about these 30 years that you were in practice. I understand you were a chiropractor primarily, but then, of course, you sort of branched out from there. Can you give me a picture of that, please?
I had no intention of kind of getting into what I am to now, because I would literally eat pure junk food all the way up until I was like 28 years old. And I got away with it for so many years, but then it caught up with me. But the only thing green that I ate, I think, was pistachio ice cream and lime green Jello. But other than that, I never ate a vegetable, never ate anything healthy. And so I was going along and getting away with it until I started getting in my 20s. And all of a sudden, I was like arthritic in my fingers and my back. I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I couldn't sleep. I started going downhill. In fact, my wife was like, "You don't look too good. You look kind of gray and almost greenish." And I was going downhill. So, of course, it was a good and bad thing. The good thing was it kind of woke me up to eating healthily and figuring out things, because I stumbled on what to do to correct things. But if I never had that experience, I never would have got into health at all. I stumbled on a book called Mastering the Zone. And I didn't even read the whole book. I just read the introduction, and it said something about insulin and avoid carbs and eat high quality protein. So the next morning I had a buffalo burger instead of my cereal, which I thought was really bad for you at the time because it causes, cancer, which is totally a lie. So I ate that, and it was almost like someone just literally took a helmet off my head and I could actually think clearly. I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. The way I was trying to solve my problems back then, instead of changing my diet, I would just be taking this supplement, doing colon cleanses and detoxes. And we'd be driving down the street, and I would tell my wife, "Hey, there's the health house. Let's go in there." And then come back with a whole bunch of vitamins. And it wasn't working because the foundation wasn't there.
So tell me about the ketogenic diet. There's some people that, even medical professionals who say it can become dangerous. Mm-hmm. Explain to me how this works.
Yeah, in real simple terms, you're basically just eliminating the massive amount of carbs that people eat. And so because when you reduce carbohydrates, it then forces your body to go after your own fat as fuel. For weight loss, it's great. And for other things, it's good too. The average person that's not overweight has literally 100,000 calories of fat on their body. So they have a lot more stored energy for running on fat than they do from the dietary source of calories. If you don't tap into your own fat, then you're going to be dependent on the next meal. You're not going to be able to go long before you're hungry. So when you start shifting off to the ketogenic diet, which is basically, it's the breakdown of fat into ketones as an alternative fuel, then you can go a lot longer because you're running off these calories that are just stored. And that allows you to get rid of your cravings and your hunger and produce a whole bunch of health effects, especially for your brain and your heart, that you never could do if you're not in ketosis. There is a certain condition, if they forget their medication and they don't take insulin and their blood sugars go too high, then the body can develop a different type of ketosis, which is like a dangerous type of ketosis. People mix them together and say all of ketosis is bad, which is not true. Our bodies were designed to not have to eat every hour and a half. So our bodies were designed to be in ketosis. Even when we're born, we're going through ketosis. So there's going to be some vested interest against that, and they're going to put out all sorts of things about ketosis. Mainly, they'll say something like, well, yes, ketosis does work and it does help you lose weight, but we don't know what's going to happen long term. Well, just a little bit of doubt in people's mind, and then they're discouraged.
Bottom line is anyone can jump on the keto diet and do it, and there's no health risk, really. Like this is what you're saying here, right?
The risk is not doing it, especially since most people have what's called insulin resistance. That's a condition where you've eaten carbs for so long, chronically, that your body is now having it's almost like it's a pre-diabetic situation where you can't use insulin as well. It's not working. And so then you get all sorts of problems like a fatty liver, and you're overweight in your midsection. It starts swelling, and the heart suffers. The brain suffers. Also, a dirty keto people go on. They kind of like go to McDonald's and they'll just eat the meat without the bun. And that's fine as a step up. But the way that I teach people to do it is to do it the healthy version. And it's okay if someone goes off the ketogenic diet. It's actually sometimes good to remind themselves of what they feel like. Like for me, it took me a long time to change my diet because I love junk food. especially Doritos and chips. And so I had to go back and forth to the point where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to feel bad anymore. I'm just going to keep it consistent. Rarely do I ever go off just because I like the way I feel without it.
Why is a McDonald's burger with no bun dirty keto? What does that even mean?
That means like you're using the lower quality of calories on the ketogenic diet. For example, keto diet is not necessarily high fat. Like people think they can eat more fat and go into ketosis. No. The way you get into ketosis is by lowering your carbohydrate. Okay. So now, of course, you have to replace those carbohydrates with something. So that's fat. Now, when people do like seed oils and like you can go and fry something in like corn oil and it's still keto because it's low carb, but is it the healthy version? Maybe not. So there's different levels of quality of ingredients. Like you look at the Atkins bars, right? It's just filled with soy protein isolates. Like that's like pretty low quality protein. Yeah, it's keto, but is it healthy? I wouldn't think so.
So, and to your point here about getting the healthy carbohydrates, you actually live on a farm, right?
Yeah.
And so you're growing these, I guess, carbohydrates and non-carbohydrates. So just tell me about that.
I have the fortunate option to live on a farm. I lived in Bethesda Alexandria for many years. And after a while, after 30 years, I was like, you know what? We need to kind of move into a location where there's more space. We actually live off the land. I have gardens. I have animals. We eat the meat. So I'm lucky in that way. I can actually have a freezer full of meat from my farm and control that. But you don't necessarily have to live on a farm to be healthy. You could get this high quality protein anywhere. But that's basically where I live. And I have a little studio that I'm in right now. I do my videos and basically one video every single day. And we have like 5,700 videos that I've done. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm up to lately.
How is it that we got to this place where I guess we forgot what good food was?
You know, I released a video today. I interviewed my father, who's 87 years old. And I started interviewing him. I'm like, what did they eat back then? And how can we compare that to now? Did they have food allergies? No. Did they have autism? No. Was there anyone that was overweight? No. Was there any diabetes? No. Like you didn't even have these problems. And so one of the conclusions that I came up with is there has been a new category of food that was invented or created or manufactured by the food industry called the snack foods. So we have the crackers, the chips, the little bars, the snack bars. I mean, back then, your parents would tell you not to ruin your appetite. And if they did have a snack, it was like an apple or something out of the garden. Now, we snack not on that. We snack on ultra-processed food calories. So we're dealing with highly refined things that are just going to raise our insulin between the meals. So now we have 3 meals and then we add the snacks. Now we get these spikes all day long. And we're creating a chronic insulin situation, which is literally destroying our health at a very early age. I remember asking my father, I says, what kind of cereal did you have? Oatmeal with milk. That was it. There wasn't, these cereals that they have now.
How is it that this actually happened, right? Because it's not just the reality of the junk food, but it's the actual guidance to some extent too, right?
You remember when tobacco was considered healthy and people smoked, and so that went over a period of time. And then there was a shift where smoking was bad. Cigarette manufacturing companies shifted gears and they bought up some of the junk food industry. And then they started producing more food that was very profitable. If you take, for example, one ingredient, corn, the type of corn they use in junk food is not sweet corn. They use what's called dent corn or field corn. It's inedible. You can't even eat it. But that's the corn that's in the chips. It's in most of the products. Because of the subsidies, they basically can buy a cubic ton of this corn for $198. Okay. Now think about how many boxes of cornflakes you can make for under $200. So you have a super cheap food that gives you a lot of pleasure at the expense of no nutrition, very little protein. So it's going to keep you eating it. My problem was the Doritos. Like I could just start and I would down the whole bag. I mean, the large bag in one sitting without even thinking twice. So we created this industry, and it created addictions. 40, 50 years later, here we are, with the problem. And unfortunately, you as a taxpayer pays for most of the raw material in this junk food unknowingly through the subsidies. And that's something that has to be cleaned up by this new administration.
Let's talk about this new administration. But before we go there, just to finish off the first question, somehow a high carbohydrate diet became kind of what we were supposed to do. Yeah. And so is that just pure lobbying, or how did that happen?
It's pure profit, because you have to make profit on things that have no shelf life. I mean, let's just take beef, for example. The margins on beef is like 3%. So why would you want to get into the beef business, right? If you look at junk food, if you take a look at just profit, they make about $260 billion a year just on the starches. And an average person consumes about 250 to 300 pounds of starch every single year. Whereas the sugars, it's like they might make, it's like 10 billion. It doesn't even compare. Yet people consume about 150 pounds of sugar a year. But starches are like, that's something that people don't talk about. So I think if we are going to make some changes, we have to, first of all, make people aware of these hidden ingredients and start to get them out of your diet.
The other thing I noticed is that if there's these hidden, basically farm subsidies, right,
yep,
in the system, if you're going to start taking apart the system, you're actually going to impact America's farmers. Those farmers, I think, played a big role in getting this administration elected.
I think what we should do is reward the small farmer, because they're being put out of business, and support them, and maybe subsidize the farmers that are doing it right with healthier foods, rather than the large industrial farms that are just literally, producing the lowest quality food you could imagine.
What about large farms that produce higher quality food? Because there must be a range. There's
a total range. Yeah. And Cornucopia is a great activist group that I support, and they have a food scoring system that they'll look at these farms, and like they talk about who's doing right, who's not doing it right, because they find these loopholes and they try to cheat the system, and it's called organic, but is it really organic? So they're really trying to keep the integrity in at least in the organic sphere. There's going to be a lot more transparency, because the largest privately owned company in the United States, I won't even say their name. That's the company that makes most of the starches and the seed oils and some of the sugars too. And they're a privately owned company, and so they don't have to disclose certain things.
What is the promise of this new administration in your view?
RFK is he's a non-politician. He's going to be a really good person to get in there to cut the umbilical cords between the cozy relationships and the conflict of interest between industry and the government. Right now, the food guidelines are associated between who has the strongest lobbyist. And so there's too much influence from industry in our food system, in our medical system, in the research of drugs. He's going to clean that up. And of course, they're going to attack him for this, but it's going to be a really vital change to remove this conflict of interest and have more transparency, so we can actually focus more on the root causes of health issues, support the smaller farmer, and make it possible for our generation to be healthy, because right now it's getting worse. So the food guidelines is so important because it trickles down into the school system, the hospitals, the assisted living home. There's an individual I know who has, he's in Arizona. He owns 4 assisted living homes. Okay. And what's really interesting about him is he changes the diet. He doesn't allow junk food. And these people are coming in from places like hospice, and his rate of reducing medications through the help of their online doctor or their doctor that's on site is like 47%. So you go in there with certain medications, and then you're coming out with almost half of those medications. So he told me this, and this is really fascinating, that the software that he uses to coordinate between the medical doctor and the medications is owned by a CEO. That I told him to contact the CEO, and I want to know, on average, what's the average number of medications that these patients are on? So he did that for me. And you're not going to believe what he said. He took 100 people, random people out of his database, and he works with people all over the United States in these assisted living homes. And he found a range between 91 medications to 42 medications with an average of 48 medications. He sent me a document with one patient on 48 medications, okay? I looked through this. I almost vomited because I'm like, you got to be kidding me. An average person going to an assisted living home is on 48 medications? I mean, this is like outrageous. This is insane. So why wouldn't we want someone like Bobby Kennedy to go in there and straighten this up, to improve this, to get people to start eating real food all over the place?
I remember thinking that too in the past, that it's so bizarre that the food you get in hospitals, isn't really a very high quality. You would think it, like, nutritionally, you might want that, right? I lived in Thailand for a couple of years, where medical tourism is a popular thing, except that it's sort of like a 5-star hotel experience, right? That's part of what you pay for, is doing whatever the medical procedure you want. And they feed you really well. And I thought, man, this is very different from the hospital food I've seen, right?
I know, like I went in for surgery, and I was like, do you have any protein? No, we have Jell-O crackers. I'm like, I need protein. Can you, I mean, it's sickening, like, especially with before surgery and after the surgery, like you need actual food.
It does seem crazy on the face of it that there's the average number across 100 random people in elder care facilities. An average person would be on 48 medications. That seems astonishingly high. However, presumably they need some of those medications. So you're arguing there's an overprescription scenario happening here.
Just like the question is, did you bring up food? Are you using food in your equation when you're diagnosing? How do you know what is causing what? Are you looking at the side effects from the medications? Maybe you're just treating the side effects of the medication with another medication, and we go round and round. When you treat symptoms and not root causes, you don't really improve the health. So like even your blood sugars, right? You take a medication to lower your blood sugars. Where do you think that's going? Where do you think that sugar is going? Is it evaporating? You're just changing one problem, you're shifting it to another part of the body. Mm-hmm. Especially there's something called iatrogenic disease. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Mm-hmm. That's medication-caused disease. That's like number 3 as far as on the top leading causes of death. Is iatrogenic is number 3. So the question is, I think, especially with the antibiotics and steroids and things like that, it should be reevaluated. The system is unworkable.
There are medical doctors, I guess the bottom line is, that do look at causes and not just symptoms, but basically the default is to look at the symptoms. Is that a right way to characterize?
There's more and more doctors are looking at the whole body. Even endocrinologists that I know, that I'm friends with, that are looking at the diet, because there's just a kind of a disconnect. They refer anything related to food to the dietitian, but then they don't have control of that. So I think the new trend is going to be looking at the whole body. And so they're not just stuck in this managing the symptom model. Just like if you take an engineer, and an engineer looks at this logically, like they're going to go, wait, what's wrong with this? What's the mechanism? What's underneath it? Like, do we ever take people off the medication? What's the plan? What's the long-term plan?
There's a lot of people that are interested in weight loss right now, and there's these, very popular new drugs, which a lot of people are going on. It's that they're actually working for people. Mm-hmm. If someone is interested in weight loss, where should people look first?
Well, I think if we look at just weight loss by itself, there's just one thing you need to know about how the body stores fat, and that has to do with the hormone insulin. So if you want to lose weight, you got to keep that insulin low. So there's 2 ways to do it. One is to lower your carbohydrates, and that would be the sugars and starches. But the other way too is you can also do a different thing, which is do intermittent fasting. Start skipping your breakfast and having like 2 meals and not the snacks. So if you go longer without the snacks, what you're going to find is you'll go into ketosis. Your appetite will go down. And we're not even talking about lowering calories. We're just talking about not eating so frequently. You can lose a lot of weight like that because every time you eat, you raise insulin, regardless of what you eat. So it's very important to know that. And the other thing I think that people don't know about is that all it takes is a little bit of carbohydrate to bump you out of ketosis for a longer period of time, like sometimes up to 48 hours. So that half a glass of wine or that toast, you kind of have to now wait for a day and a half to 2 days before you get back in the ketosis. So I'll have people that are saying, well, I'm trying it, but it's not working. And then you ask them what they're doing. They're like, well, yeah, I do have a little bit of something in between the meals. I'm like, okay, so just do intermittent fasting. Watch what happens. And it finally works for them. If you try to do a diet with higher in carbs, it's torture because you're trying to lose weight with hunger and cravings. I mean, that's hard. At night, you're like looking at the cupboard and like, oh my gosh, I need some carbs, right? So it will make it easier. Yes, it does take discipline, but I think the best thing to do is don't have it in the house where it can tempt you.
I want to touch on a few things which you, I guess, recommend. I don't know how broadly, but one of the things that we've discussed before privately is vitamin D. I discovered it really as such an important thing during the COVID-19 pandemic, where people with higher levels of vitamin D just had a lot better outcomes on average.
Vitamin D is the most important vitamin because it's involved in 10% of all of our genes. That's like over 2,500 genes. Think about how vast that is, right? Everything from the immune system to the brain to inflammation to your bones. So it's not just about bones, absorbing calcium for bones. It's about a lot of different things. The question is, can you get enough vitamin D from the diet? No, you can't. It's impossible. You can get it from the sun, but think about what happened in the 80s. We or someone had this idea that we should stay out of the sun because sun causes skin cancer. We became sun phobic. And even nowadays, it's hard to find even kids outside. What we really need as a maintenance dosage on a daily basis to maintain all of the systems in the body with just as a maintenance dose is 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3. Very few people know that, and very few people are doing that. They're using the outdated information that was only researched about with your bones preventing rickets, which is like soft bones in children. And they're not looking at all this amazing research. And I think because the amount of competition with medications is very high, because if you take a look at vitamin D, what it can do for inflammation, what it can do for autoimmune, what it can do for respiratory infections, what it can do for insulin issues. It's literally amazing when you dive into the research. I think I have over 280 videos in vitamin D. So I am like very interested in this topic because it's the lowest hanging fruit if you want to get someone healthy, really. It's like if you just give them vitamin D for so many issues, they can actually improve. It's inexpensive. You could use the sun if it's summer, but if not, it's not that expensive as a modality, a treatment.
What about turmeric?
Okay, so turmeric has this active ingredient called curcumin. Out of all of the herbal remedies, that one is the most researched. It has the most broad spectrum effects of anything. That is probably on the scale of importance. That's like a really top herb that can literally do so many things. And I think because it can grow in very dehydrated environments. And so that plant has adapted for hundreds of thousands of years to create these amazing defense mechanisms and these properties of survival that we can then consume, and it helps our bodies in many different ways, especially as an anti-inflammatory. I would highly recommend including that in your diet on a regular basis. You can do it through curries or the, teas.
Curiously, in Polish, the word for turmeric is kurkuma. So I'm a native speaker. That's what I keep thinking. as you say it. And I might add, it's delicious. It's just a wonderful thing.
One thing
So,
that I made a mistake of, I'm always the kind of the guy that if it's a little is good, a lot is better. No, not with turmeric.
yeah, there's definitely a limit, and you don't want to get it on your shirt. So
Oh,
yes.
I grew it, and then I dried it out, and I started to eat it through the day, like for several days in a row. I was just eating it constantly. Got sick. You don't need much. Just have a little bit.
You help people with like basically fatigue and so forth. I mean, what is your must have like a broad approach to dealing with that. Or
When you take a symptom like fatigue, that can come from a lot of different things. So the first question I always ask is like, what are you eating? But as far as nutrients go, there's a really important nutrient that people know about, but they don't really connect it to fatigue. But if you go into the cells, the energy factory of the cell, the mitochondria, which is a very important part of the cell, in order to make energy, the last little part of that requires magnesium. And it's a little motor that spins. It's an enzyme that spins like 400 times a second. It's like the most amazing little motor, and it's in your body, and it's working to make what's called ATP, and it requires magnesium. So yes, magnesium people take for leg cramps and to sleep and for stress, but energy, you should take a magnesium for energy, because if you take vitamin D, that's the most important. The second one is magnesium. Magnesium is almost impossible to test because most of the magnesium is inside the tissues. It's not in the blood. I mean, only 1% of it's in the blood. So you have to have a special test, and no one gets that. It's something that's also very commonly deficient. And the one that I would recommend is something like a magnesium glycinate, because that's the one that won't cause diarrhea, and it gets absorbed 80%, and you take it right before bed. And great for muscle stuff, sleeping.
apparently, it's good for sleeping, but then it's also good for energy.
Yeah, right. Well, you know what? It takes energy to sleep, which is interesting. Some people are too tired to actually rest. So they're laying down, they're restless, and they just can't get into a relaxed state.
What about the superfoods? What is the top superfood in your mind?
I think this is going to surprise you, because when people think superfoods, they drink the green drinks, right? But there's a much higher level of superfood that has virtually every nutrient, very bioavailable, and it's actually red meat. Red meat. People are going to say, oh my gosh, I thought that was like, it's just like processed meat. No, I'm talking about grass-fed red meat, whether it's beef or it's lamb. I mean, it has so many nutrients, iron and B12, and plus the protein is the highest quality. It's even better than eggs because it has better omega-3 ratios. And so it's really a good healing food. People have gone on to the plant proteins, and they're not going to feel as good. So it's high quality protein. Most of our body is protein. And that would be something that a person would notice immediately a difference.
Eric, final thought as we finish?
I think my final thought on this would be, instead of this huge focus on treating disease and focusing on getting rid of disease, let's start to focus on creating our health. It's a different question. It's a different model. Instead of waiting till you get a disease and treating it, let's prevent that by looking at common, simple things that you can do to, lifestyle changes that involve, at the real essence of it, eating real food. That's the most important thing you can do.
Well, Eric Berg, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.